Hey, have you been sitting around thinking about starting a YouTube channel? Feeling like you have a lot to say and would love to get on here and make a name for yourself? Yeah. I get you. I've been there. For new YouTubers in the making, get your hands on my Get Started checklist. I'll hold your hand through everything you need to know to just get started already. It's 100% free, and you'll be posting your first brilliant video by next week. Check it out at the link below. All right, let's get started already. In 2019, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife, well-known Tea Party far-right, some would say extremist, Ginny Thomas, took an all-expenses-paid trip on the private jet of a billionaire to Indonesia, where they boarded his yacht and spent a week touring the 𝗪𝗧𝗏 Islands. They were familiar with this yacht, having taken similar all-expenses-paid trips to New Zealand and, allegedly, Greece. This is just a peek into the lavish gifts Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has been receiving for decades, according to a new ProPublica report. And it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how entrenched the Supreme Court is with dark and seedy money. Are our justices being bought out by billionaires? How far does this influence go? Let's talk about it. Roll the intro. Let me take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Factor. I hate cooking. I don't want to do it. I don't want to think about what I'm going to put in my body. I just want it to magically appear for me. But also I want to be able to eat it and not feel like crap afterwards, okay? But also, I don't want to have to go to the grocery store. You guys, it's going to be in the 70s in Minnesota next week, which is absolutely thrilling, okay? And I don't want to be inside trying to decide what to eat for dinner and mournfully strolling the aisles of my nearest grocery store. I want to be out frolicking. This is why I keep partnering with Factor over and over, because they cook for me. Their food is delicious and it just magically appears on my doorstep, fresh, never frozen, and I don't have to do anything other than heat it up. When I'm busy delving into my research to bring you these high quality videos, the last thing that I want to do is cook, okay? And I genuinely love their food. It is tasty as hell. I love that there is no prep and no mess to clean up. I just pop it in the microwave, beep bop boop, and it's done. Factor meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes. So I get to eat food I know is fresh and healthy, but Factor also offers a really great variety with a rotating weekly menu of 25+ meal options. For example, I recently loved this blackened salmon meal. It was tasty as hell, and I didn't have to cook it. And the fact that I didn't have to cook it, I cannot stress to you how much I love this for me. Factor's become my go-to lunch or dinner solution when I'm juggling a million things throughout my day and I don't have time to cook. They also have these really delicious smoothies that are very handy when I need to head out the door, but I know I'm gonna need to refuel before I get home. Plus, they have a variety of meal plans to choose from, including keto, vegan, vegetarian, and protein plus meals on a rotating menu each week. Factor is now owned by HelloFresh, so with both brands, I really enjoy the flexibility of being able to cook conveniently with HelloFresh or grab and go with Factor. Love this for me. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Leeja50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thanks, Factor. So according to this new ProPublica report, Clarence Thomas has received luxury vacations for over 20 years, paid for by a billionaire Republican donor named Harlan Crow, heir to a real estate empire. We're talking yachts, private jets, private resorts, you name it. According to ProPublica, the extent and frequency of Crow's apparent gifts to Thomas have no known precedent in the modern history of the US Supreme Court. Yikes.
Yikes.
Why is this big news? Because in the 20 years that old Clarence has been allegedly receiving these gifts, he has never disclosed them. We don't like that, because Supreme Court justices, just like all federal judges, have to disclose certain gifts. You see, after Watergate, a law was passed that requires justices, judges, and members of Congress and federal officials to disclose most gifts, especially those worth more than $415. These gifts don't include gifts from family or the cost of being hosted as a guest in someone's private residence. It does, however, generally include things like private jets and yachts and other comped transportation. According to ethics experts, Clarence should have disclosed the flights that he took and the yachts that he's ridden in. And he's accepted these luxury trips virtually every year for the last 20 years. According to ethics experts and 4 current and retired federal judges, by accepting these trips, Thomas has broken long-standing norms for judges' conduct. Basically, the idea is that you shouldn't use the office you hold or the position in the Supreme Court to your own personal benefit, in theory. And many judges don't even disclose who they are as they're out and about or making reservations at places, etc., for fear of getting special treatment or having their judgment swayed by bias. In all of these alleged trips that Clarence Thomas has taken in the last 3 decades that he's known Crow, this billionaire, Thomas disclosed a private jet flight paid for by Crow once in 1997, which indicates that he knew he should do it and just hasn't in the 25 years since then. A Washington Post article seems to link a 2004 front-page story in the Los Angeles Times as a turning point in Thomas's gift disclosure practices. That article was titled "Justice Thomas Reports Wealth of Gifts," and it detailed the gifts he had disclosed prior to 2004, which amounted to tens of thousands of dollars in the 6 years since he had taken office, which was far more than any other justice at the time. In the 19 years since that article was published, he has reported a total of 2 gifts. Sus. And there's been a lot of talk about life tenure of Supreme Court justices and whether that's a good idea, but Supreme Court justices have lifetime tenure because that privilege is intended to protect against political biases. They don't need to seek re-election, so there's no reason to kowtow to certain parties, theoretically. Unless that certain party has members with incredible amounts of wealth that they just happen to be willing to spend on you. There is a code of conduct for federal judges that requires judges to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. But that's for federal judges below the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court itself has no code of conduct. They are left entirely to police themselves. And you know what happens when a group of very powerful people are left to just police themselves? They let themselves get away with shit. But none have seemingly done so with the level of impunity that Clarence Thomas has. Him and Harlan Crow have been pals for years. They met after Clarence became a justice, which almost didn't happen because of credible sexual harassment allegations against him by Anita Hill. May we never forget. Like I said, Harlan Crow is a billionaire and major Republican donor. In fact, back in 2011, Politico reported that Crow had given $500,000 to a Tea Party group. A group founded by whomst? Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, who also received a $120,000 salary from that group. According to ProPublica, Crow has spent millions on ideological efforts to shape the law and the judiciary. But he also claims that he never once, on the yearly trips he's taken with Clarence for 2 decades, has never once ever tried to influence him. That's preposterous. When he's vacationing with Crow at remote destinations or in Crow's private lodge in the Adirondacks, Thomas and his wife Ginny are staying for free and coming into contact with other people that this billionaire Republican donor likes to rub elbows with. But definitely that wouldn't have any sway on Clarence Thomas's judgment. There is a literal painting of Clarence Thomas hung at Crow's private resort that depicts Thomas having a conversation with Leonard Leo, a leader of the Federalist Society who's been considered a spearhead in the movement to turn the Supreme Court towards conservatism. Not to mention that Crow sits on the board of the Hoover Institution, a conservative think tank that occasionally files amicus briefs with the Supreme Court, among other things. Yikes. Yikes. In a statement after the ProPublica article dropped, Justice Thomas claimed, "As friends do, we have joined Crow and his wife on a number of family trips during the more than quarter century we have known them. Early in my tenure at the court, I sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable." Okay, then why did you report a private jet flight in 1997 if you didn't think it was reportable? Where do I get friends who take me to exotic locations on their private jets? Huh? This is also all coming from a guy who loves to paint himself as of the people, claiming at one point to prefer Walmart over the beach because he comes from working class folk and that's just where he's comfortable, according to Clarence Thomas. It must have been really difficult then for him to board those private jets and be waited on by chefs on yachts in exotic locations. That must have been so hard for him. Within hours of ProPublica's report, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, vowed that the committee will investigate the allegations, with others calling for officially creating a Supreme Court Code of Conduct already, and AOC, who called for Thomas to be impeached, though of course conservatives have control of the House, so any move to actually impeach him would likely be unsuccessful. And since we're discussing shady financial dealings by Supreme Court justices, let's talk about Brett Kavanaugh, shall we? Like I said, federal judges judges are required to disclose their gifts. They're also required to disclose their financials generally. It's part of the job. Take it or leave it. We gotta see your income, your debts, and where you're getting that side hustle money. Because if you agree to become a judge, you are held to higher standards, as you fucking should be. In Kavanaugh's financial disclosures, after he joined the DC Circuit Court back in 2006, he disclosed debt across 3 credit cards and a loan against his retirement account that totaled between $60,000 and $200,000. Now that's a huge range because federal officials and judges are not required to disclose exact dollar amounts, just these wide ranges. Still, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And listen, old Bretty boy, okay, no shame. Debt happens to the best of us, and it really weighs on you. Isn't debt awful? Wouldn't it be cool if, say, a case landed in your hands where you could use your empathy and power to approve the forgiveness of debt for millions of Americans? Wouldn't that be wild? Anyway, I digress. He had a lot of debt, okay, that's the point. And then, after 2016, his debts apparently vanish. When he showed up before the Senate Judiciary hearing in 2018 for his Supreme Court confirmation hearing, his financial disclosure form listed no debt other than his $815,000 mortgage. Yet his disclosures don't show any major increase in income, no major gifts or donations, and no gambling windfalls. On top of that, during his time in the federal judiciary, he was earning around $220,000 per year. His wife wasn't working, and when she did, she was working in a lower governmental position that paid around $60,000. Yet he lived in a $1.2 million mansion in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and sent 2 kids to private school for $20,000 a year, and had a membership at a country club that charges $92,000 in initiation fees. Now, $220,000 a year is a lot of money, but it's not that much, okay? It's not $92,000 country club rich. To put it into context, there are people graduating from law school right now who are about to start their very first law job and be making around $210,000 a year. Starting. So in the context of the legal profession, $220,000 a year is not a ton of money, and it's certainly not $92,000 country club money, okay? Other than his house, he has never listed any assets of high net worth other than mentioning a government retirement account. So his finances at the time he entered the Supreme Court left many questions unanswered and many holes that people were trying to figure out. In his testimony, Brett Kavanaugh admitted to getting a lot of money from his parents. Gifts from family, conveniently, are not required to be disclosed. We love a Nepo baby rags to riches tale. However, these questions about his finances have blossomed into what Mother Jones characterizes as a full-blown leftist conspiracy theory that some rich benefactor like a Leonard Leo, that Federalist Society leader I mentioned before, paid off Brett Kavanaugh's debts, and he's now owned by some dark money, unnamed Republican billionaire. That's the theory anyway. They're saying someone had to have paid off his debts and all his financial pitfalls for him to be able to live such a lavish lifestyle on that income. That someone, according to Mother Jones, is probably just his dad. Conveniently, again, we don't get to know about Daddy's pockets in federal disclosures. It's the most boring answer, but also the most likely answer. I wouldn't know, I don't have a dad, but I imagine if you did, and he was making $13 million a year like Brett's dad was when he retired, it probably wouldn't be too hard to ask Daddy to pay off that $92,000 country club bill. And this conspiracy about Brett Kavanaugh's finances distracts from the public and legal amounts of cash being spent to sway court nominations across the country and at the Supreme Court level. Over the past 40 years, the Federalist Society and the Judicial Crisis Network, an organization whose mission statement says, "Our commitment is to the Constitution and the Founders' vision of a nation of limited government. We support efforts to ensure only highly qualified individuals who share this vision comprise our state and federal courts and staff executive branch offices that administer and enforce the law." So these conservative groups have received millions and millions of dollars from large corporate donors to put anti-regulatory, anti-abortion, pro-gun conservatives like Kavanaugh on the bench throughout the country. The Judicial Crisis Network alone received $22 million in anonymous donations during Kavanaugh's hearing and pledged to spend as much as $10 million of that backing Kavanaugh's confirmation. And we don't know who those political donors were, and that's legal. In fact, it is illegal to disclose the names and addresses of major donors to tax-exempt organizations. It is, however, required that campaign contributions be made public, which is why tax-exempt political nonprofits have become so popular. Donors give money to the nonprofit anonymously, and then that nonprofit funnels the money to the right people to lobby for their and their donors' political objectives. As I've already said in a recent video, America. You can do anything with your money as long as you funnel it properly. And conveniently, in 2021, the Supreme Court heard a case called Americans for Prosperity Foundation versus 𝗫𝗀𝗃. Americans for Prosperity Foundation is exactly the conservative, tax-exempt entity that takes money and uses it for their donors' political objectives that we've been talking about. 𝗫𝗀𝗃 is Attorney General of California, Rob 𝗫𝗀𝗃, who was being sued in his official capacity because the California Attorney General's office required California charities to provide the list of major donors to the state government. The list was confidential, it wasn't public, but Americans for Prosperity Foundation was like, nah, not secretive enough, which is always a good sign when an organization wants to be more secretive about its money. And of course, this Supreme Court that we are all stuck with found in favor of Americans for Prosperity, saying it was a violation of the donors' First Amendment rights to freedom of association for the government to require the list of their names. In a dramatic show of willful ignorance, the attorney for Americans for Prosperity compared this case to a case during the civil rights movement that found it was unconstitutional to require the disclosure of names of NAACP members, which is an insult to the civil rights movement because we're not talking dark money funneled through tax-exempt political orgs in that case. We're talking about literal threat of lynching if the NAACP members' names were disclosed. Like, get your head out of your ass, okay? Lawyers are willing to argue anything, even if it's disgusting, if it furthers their side, because they're a bunch of fucking creeps. Anyway, so conveniently for the Supreme Court, for its members like Brett Kavanaugh, who sit where they currently sit because of perfectly legal, politically motivated spending by anonymous donors, it sided with the tax-exempt orgs so that we can continue to watch our entire political system be run by anonymous donors who don't have to answer for themselves or the bias they're creating that's ruining the fabric of our legal and political system. It's an infection in those systems that runs from the lowest rungs all the way to the tippity top. Thanks again to my partner on today's video, Factor. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Leeja50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thanks, Factor. And if you like this video, you'll also like my video all about why our elected officials are allowed to play the stock market. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye!